Good afternoon, Comp 1, fully online class. I had the hope this would be a nice spot to shoot a tiny lesson on argumentation and persuasion. And unfortunately, my neighbor over there, my farmer, well, he's sighting in his gun. Deer hunting season. So we'll have a little gunplay in the background. What you're going to do in the next week with the next essay is try your hand at argumentation. Try your hand at persuasion. The paper is dead simple. You're going to have to pick out a topic. You're going to compass out how you feel about the topic, and then you're going to build an argument, and you're going to try to make me see things the way you do. Don't pick a topic that's too big, and don't pick a topic that's too small. And we've probably got a couple, 3 lessons here on argumentation before we get back to the study and the wondering about style. I haven't forgotten that we started up something on that. Before we move into this material, and before I guess I had a little aphasic little moment. My son will edit that out. I'd like to say the obvious. You've heard me say repeatedly that rhetoric is the study of action, the study of human symbolic action. We act on the world and the world acts on us. And you want to be able to know how to be persuasive. You want to know how to make arguments. By arguments, I don't mean fighting. I mean getting someone to see things your way, to conciliate them to believe things as you do. I've had a pretty lucky life in terms of making arguments. And I can think of big arguments that I've been successful at and small ones too. Why am I shooting this video and trying to serve you as your teacher? Well, I gently, a year ago, convinced Central Lakes College they should accept me as a teacher. And that interview went really well, and that's why I'm in my 2nd year at Central Lakes College. The best job I've ever had in my life. It took a year and a half, but eventually I talked my wife into marrying me 27, 28 years ago. We're in our 26th year of marriage. We got a couple of children. There was a little rhetoric there. Across your life too, as you move through it, you're going to need to be able to make appeals. Now, before we go any further, you probably deserve some words straight out of Aristotle's Rhetoric. And let's just take a look at this paragraph. I'll read it, and you'll see it here too in this little vid. Aristotle, earlier in the Rhetoric, says, "Rhetoric may be defined as the faculty of observing, in any given case, the available means of persuasion. This is not a function of any other art. Every other art can instruct or persuade about its own particular subject matter. For instance, medicine, about what is healthy and unhealthy. Geometry, about the properties of magnitudes. Arithmetic, about numbers. And the same is true of the other arts and sciences. But rhetoric we look upon as the power of observing the means of persuasion on almost any subject presented to us. And that is why we say that, in its technical character, it is not concerned with any special or definite class of subjects." I love that definition for lots of reasons. And I particularly like the idea of rhetoric being the faculty of observing, in any case, the available means of persuasion. In another translation, I've seen rhetoric as the art of discovering. But what I love about it is that it puts us before the idea that when we're going to make an argument, we have to ask ourselves, what can we use? What can we use? What's available? Well, if you're Socratic, if you're trying to be a good person, you argue according to truths. You try to come up with decent examples. You make cool comparisons and analogies, and you make those persuasive appeals centered on ethos, knowledge, goodness, goodwill. We make emotional-centered appeals, and we make logical-centered appeals. Now, I'm not going to vilify them like I used to. The sophists made fantastic contributions to rhetorical theory, but they are also famous for saying to their students for 25-plus centuries, hey, do whatever it takes. Do whatever it takes to win. Rhetoric is about winning. It's about oppression. It's about psychological victory. If you have to tell the truth and that worked, good. But if it doesn't, maybe you have to lie. Maybe you have to flatter. Maybe you have to twist the truth a little bit, withhold the truth. Maybe you'll enlist the fallacies of logic. Maybe you'll manipulate a little bit someone emotionally. Now, the thing about writing this paper, and try to keep this in mind, whatever topic you choose, it should be arguable. It should have 2 sides. The ancients were famous for that. They were expected one day to be able to walk into a classroom and say, I believe this, and then argue it. And the next day you were supposed to come in and argue the contra. If you write a paper in which you argue that a certain group should not be discriminated against or persecuted, it's pretty hard to come around the next day and argue that that group should be discriminated against and persecuted for whatever it stands for. So try to make sure that your argument has two sides of the proverbial coin. I also want to say that very often, unless it's a trivial topic, arguing requires us to deal with opinions and probabilities. It's pretty rare that you're actually going to know something, right? The Greeks were obsessed with arriving at proofs. The ancient word for proof was pistis or pisteus. Dave Severson taught me that at St. Cloud State in the late 80s. They wanted a proof to kick out of whatever argument. I think of the Greeks standing around in Plato's Phaedrus. You know, I always imagine them standing there in togas, sipping wine with their feet in a stream like they are in that famous dialogue. At the end of those long conversations, which is called dialectic, where they're trying to get to the bottom of things, they always wanted this big moment where someone could say, wow, you proved it right there. In order to create proofs, the Greeks created two rhetorical machines. One of them is useful, one of them isn't. The first is the famous syllogism. If you've ever taken geometry, this will sound familiar to you. A syllogism is a three-step chain of reasoning that leads to a proof. It has a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion that sort of kicks out at the end. You've heard them before. All men are mortal. Socrates is mortal. Or Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. He's going to die. That proves it. There's no way around it, the way those premises mathematically come around and kick that out. But you know what? Syllogisms are awkward. It's really hard to use them when you're writing. When you're writing a paper at Central Lakes College or wherever you go, you're going to find them very unwieldy to enlist. And that's why we're all happy that the syllogism has kind of a little brother, a cousin, so to speak, and that is a dangerous little monster called the enthymeme. The enthymeme is a two-step cause-effect chain of reasoning that leads to a proof. It often has a word like because in it. And it doesn't prove things, but it works with probabilities, right? To try to carry the day in terms of argumentation. I can with confidence say to you that most of the people who get their AA degree this next spring from Central Lakes College are probably going to have better lives than they would without the degree. Can I prove that? Can I prove that every single one of them is going to do better? No, of course not. But in terms of probabilities and just looking at what I know about the world, it's better to have degrees than not have degrees. I've already talked a little bit about how hard the world is on people who don't finish them, and that's why you've got to finish whatever it is you started. That's a classic enthymeme. That's a standard enthymeme. Because you have this degree, things might go well for you or better than if they hadn't. Enthymemes are powerful. You've absolutely got to be able to know how to understand. You have to understand how to use them. You've got to know how to enlist them in prose and just in moving through the world and in living your lives. I can touch on one other thing too. I don't want to make this video too long. In the Rhetoric, Aristotle quite famously says that when you're arguing, you should use the essentials. Only argue the essentials. And then in the next sentence, he sort of allows for the possible and occasional enlistment of something called non-essentials. Now, there's a long list of non-essentials, and I'm going to give them to you in the next video. They take the form of rhetorical fallacies, logical fallacies. But just as there's a right rhetoric and a clearly a wrong rhetoric, there is kind of a gray rhetoric that's in between. And I want you to understand that. When I built my little house over there, just to tell you a story I told my face-to-face students earlier this fall, I got in a spot where I needed to use a non-essential. And it had to do something that you're not going to hear the whole story of, but the gist of it is this. That little house over there, 16 years ago when I put it in, I had an excavator come, dig a hole, and pour walls. And you know what? I didn't have a building permit yet. I had done everything but get the building permit at the county level. I had the township permit. Thought I was going to get away with it here in the middle of the woods, and well, I didn't. When I did get the building permit finally, I was charged a $500 fine by Stearns County for something called an after-the-fact building permit. When I got the building permit, I had to take my check out and write a check for $500. I said to the guy behind the counter, a sweetheart of a guy named Ed, I said, Ed, I want to get out of this now. How do I get out of this fine? He said, you can't get out of it. No one's ever gotten out of it. I said, if I wanted to get out of it, what would the method be? And he said, you're going to have to appear before the proverbial tribunal of elders. In other words, the Stearns County Board of Commissioners. I did appear before the Stearns County Board of Commissioners, knowing that the odds weren't good, the probabilities weren't good. What were the essential facts of the case? Well, you know what? They weren't very flattering, not a very charming story. I dug a hole, poured walls, got a house started without having a building permit on a little stake. I sat down, clicked on the microphone. I was facing 7 senior citizens, mostly wearing flannel. They said, Mr. Johnson, sorry about the gunplay. Mr. Johnson, you've been fined $500 by Stearns County for digging a hole, pouring walls without a building permit. What do you have to say for yourself? We hear you want to talk your way out of it. I said, you know what? I did this. The essential facts were I really did this. But you know what? I told them I wasn't trying to build a secret house. I reminded them to get this little house in here. I was working with everyone on the planet. A lot of rhetoric needed there. I worked with Soil and Conservation, the DNR, Fisheries and Wildlife, the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm in an environmentally sensitive area here, and I had to work with an awful lot of people. I think I spoke for about a minute, and then when I got near the end, after arguing the essentials, I had to pull the trigger on some non-essentials. Now you ask yourself if this is ethical or not. I looked into their eyes, and because I knew gestures are very important in rhetoric, I put my hands over my heart like this, and I said, listen, I do believe that I should be fined some amount of money. But I want to tell you something. I'm a Catholic school teacher. And while I do believe I should be fined something, I do believe that $500 is an inordinate hardship on my little family. And you know what? They started fighting right on the spot. One of them made a motion right on the spot that said, I think we should give Jeff Johnson $401 back and keep 99. This one guy who got really angry argued that I should be paid $500 for having to come in and argue the thing. You know, they were squabbling back and forth. And look what I was doing. Look what I was doing. Is this ethical or not? Right there, one of these flannel-shirted people should have said, hey, man, that's an Aristotelian non-essential. You're building a lake home. What did I mean? Catholic school teacher? Well, I was trying to tell them that I didn't make a lot of money. I also knew that half of them would be Catholic and the other half would be sympathetic Lutherans at Stearns County. And what about the phrase little family? Pan down here, Jeffy. What was I doing with little family? Doesn't that kind of evoke me, you know, out on a plane somewhere, you know, gathering my family around with like tumbleweeds blowing by? Little family? What did I mean by that? Well, 2 kids, we could say that's little. Is that ethical or not? Did I manipulate them? I got $401 back. Had I not argued the non-essential, had I not pulled the trigger on that, I don't get that check cut. I lose $401, which to this minute to me is a lot of money. Looks like I can see. I hope you can see we're playing with fire here, boys and girls. We have right rhetoric, wrong rhetoric, and I think that's gray rhetoric. My face-to-face classes, here's some horrific examples of me arguing like a sophist, because there is an inner sophist. I've done all kinds of harmful things with words, both spoken and written. But hoping that you realize that we've got, again, I'm repeating myself, an awesome responsibility to use language properly. And I'm really excited to read your argumentative papers that are going to be coming home to roost next week. More on argumentation in the next video.